we're going to talk about circles. The next assignment right now, anyways, as of this semester, is put together of 2.1 and 2.4. So circles and parabolas, kind of fun stuff. So a circle is just a set of points on a plane that are fixed distance from a specific point, the center, right? And we refer to that as the radius. Remember that? What is the distance all the way across the circle in the middle? Remember what that's called? Diameter. So you guys remember some stuff, but we're not doing geometry, no worries. You do need to remember what a radius is, okay? When we talk about the standard equation of a circle, I'm going to write it kind of underneath actually because this space wasn't quite enough for the way I write, but x minus h squared, and I'll tell you what these things mean, plus y minus k squared equals radius squared. So h and k are just numbers that will be in there, and they represent the center. So your center is h and k. Because of the minus signs in the formula, when you label your center, you're going to take the opposite sign when you pull it out. So we can just look at the equation and be able to tell what the center is once we know that. And because of the minus signs, we're going to use the opposite sign in here that you get from here. So that's just like a keynote. You can write more or less whatever you want. You know, your radius, your given radius squared. So remember, you're going to have to find the square root of it to find the actual radius. Because in the formula, it's radius squared. So if I'm giving you the standard equation of a circle and I ask you what's the center, what's the radius, you have to find the square root of that number and then tell me what it is. So if we were asked to graph it, which you're not really going to have to ever graph these, but it gives you a good visual what's happening with the math of this equation. But the center of this circle, again, when we find the center, we're just pulling out the opposite sign. So because that's a -6, I'm going to say a +6. Because that's a +3, I'm going to say -3. That's going to give me the center part. Again, it's because, I'll just say it one more time, and then I'll stop saying it. When we plug it in, it might make more sense because I'll do it once. It's because you have a minus sign there, so if I were plugging a 6 back in there, it would still be that x minus 6. If I were plugging this -3 back in there, it'd be like saying minus a -3, which we would fix and say is a +3, right? So that's why if you'll just memorize that you're pulling out the opposite sign for your center, you're going to be good. Your radius this is representing radius squared. So you just take the square root of it, so your radius is 7. So if you know those two things, you can kind of at least sketch a circle. We don't have a compass, so you don't have to like, or what is that? It's not called a compass. It's called a, what are those things called? No, it is a compass, because protractor is the hard thing. So I was right.
The one with like the pencil.
It's been a little while since I've done geometry. Yeah, with the little pencil on the end. You guys remember those things? Here we are. We can do geometry. We're not doing geometry though. So let's go over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Down 3. 1, 2, 3. So it's like somewhere right there. If I counted right, my eyes get kind of messed up, and those are little small lines. I probably need a bigger graph for me. And then in every direction, if you just go, you know, north, south, east, west with it, you just go up 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This would be here, somewhere here and here. And it just makes a circle. Let's just give you a good idea of what's happening and how that formula is applied to an actual graph. But you don't have to ever graph it or even pick a graph when it comes to the circles. We do with parabolas though. So we're going to go practice determining the circle and the radius a couple more times before we move on. If you look at number 2, it's given to you a little bit different. So this would be like, I know it just says x squared, but it would be kind of similar to saying, if I say x plus 0 squared plus y plus 0 squared equals 36. You know, sometimes our center is just going to be at the origin. And it's not like we can take the opposite sign of 0. Okay, so for this one, if you just have x squared or y squared, your center will just be zeros, right? It'll just be the origin. Remember, origin just means right here. So my center here is 0, 0. And again, my radius is just taking the square root of that 36, because right now that represents radius squared. So my radius is 6. So sometimes that's all you have to do with these. If it's given to you, if the equation is already like given to you in standard form, it's really that simple. There's not a whole lot of thinking yet. Let's go to B. What's the center of B? Very good. -3, because it was positive, take the opposite sign, and +5 is the y part. And my radius is not 121, it's the square root of 121, which is 11. If you didn't know that, you can just plug it into your calculator. You probably have some of those perfect square numbers memorized to at least 144, I bet. Maybe. Maybe not. So that makes it pretty easy when it's already given to you in standard form, and you can just pull that information out from the formula. If you turn the page though, we may have to create an equation. So we're going backwards. Remember in math, it's like we always do an inverse of everything we do. So this time we have to find the equation when we're given the center. We're not pulling the center out, and we're given the radius. So remember, your formula is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals radius squared. So this is your h and k right here, and this is your radius. I just put it underneath it to help you like identify what it's representing. But because this is the center, remember when we were going the opposite direction, we were just pulling them out. So all we do is, and I'm going to keep the signs now, but after this I'll show you, it's just easier to change the signs in the beginning. So x minus, and my h happens to be a -5. Can you already see why it's easier to, even when you're going the opposite direction, just change the sign? Because this will end up being a +5, because you have that double negative. You can make 2 plus signs or 1 big plus sign, however you like to do it. So that would be like the same as, you could have just said, because it's a -5, I could just write x plus 5 when you put it back in. Change its sign when you put it back in. But just showing you with the formula so you kind of understand why we're changing them when we pull them out. So y minus, and k is 2 squared. So since it was positive, we have a -2 in that parentheses. And then we have radius is 8, but that's not radius squared. So we do have to go square that number. So just like when it was given to us, it was representing radius squared and we had to square root it. Well, now we're given the radius, so we have to go square it. So let's clean this up. We have x plus 5 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 64. So really easy way to think of this. Again, if you just kind of recap that problem, we were given this before and asked to find the center and the radius. When we said the center, we said that was a -5, and this was a +2. And then we had to find the square root of 64, which is 8. The more you do and undo it, the easier it is to just put it back in as an equation. But I could just say x, since that's a -5, plus 5 squared, plus y, since that's a +2, -2 squared. And then you know you need to square that number, because right now it's just representing r, and our formula represents r squared. Right there. So You just did it and undid it. But 4 makes you think a little bit outside the box. You know, anytime you know everything but one variable, you can always find whatever it is, even if it's not given to you, like you're used to seeing it. So number 4 says, find the standard form of the equation of a circle that has the center of 6, -3, so those are our h and k's, passing through a point. So this is an x and a y. So what do I not know here that I knew here to be able to make the equation?
Radius.
Radius. So this is the hint. We need to find our radius. Or you could think radius squared. Because to make the equation, we have to know radius squared, right? Okay, so we can do this. We already know that our standard form, I'm going to rewrite it again, is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals radius squared. So this is where we know some things. Okay, my x is 4. This is, the x part is not the center. So if you need to color code things because you get mixed up, you can. And at least you won't get those two things mixed up, because I know your center is still an ordered pair, but it's representing the h and k. This other one is just the x and y part. So x is 4 minus my h part, or remember we take the opposite sign. So no, it's still minus. I was going to change the sign. I don't know why. I was going to change it and then change it again. So because it's a positive 6, it would be a minus 6 squared. Plus y, my k is -3, so we're going to say plus 3. What should I just put in for y? I'm on the struggle bus. Everybody help me.
1.
What is, yes, it's 1. I don't think I have my little thing, so we're just going to go like this really dark. Okay, that's 1, because we have 1. And we don't know radius squared, though. I didn't struggle there. So we're just plugging in x was 4, and the opposite of 6 is minus 6. Y is 1, and the opposite of -3 is plus 3. Then we can do this math, and technically you could type all of that into your calculator from left to right if you want. I'm going to go ahead and just work it because we're smart enough to do it without a calculator too. So 4 minus 6 is -2 squared, plus 1 plus 3 is 4 squared. -2 times -2 is 4, plus 4 times 4 is 16. So 20 is our radius squared. But technically, our formula calls for radius squared, doesn't it? I'll still use pink. I don't need to find the square root of that or anything, which is really nice. I can just use 20. So to find the equation of the circle, we're just using the center and our radius squared value that we just found. So we have x, and the opposite of 6 is minus, so minus 6 squared, plus y, the opposite of -3 is plus 3 squared, and since we found radius squared to be 20, we just write 20. And that would be the equation. So it's a little bit different than what you did before because you were given only radius. So that's why we didn't have to do anything, you know, that's why we had to square it. But here we found radius squared. You guys see that? See the difference between the two with radiuses? Any questions? Okay, let's go on to why I love completing the square. We get to actually use it in something else, and it's with circles. So when we're completing the square, remember that that's creating a perfect square trinomial which factors down into a binomial squared. If you noticed, these formulas have binomial squares, right? So we have to get it in that form, and we can kind of manipulate and create that so it can be what we need it to be. So let's take a look here. Remember, when we're completing the square, we don't want a constant on the same side. We just want letters, which that's what we do have. What I would draw attention to is we want to reorganize this problem. We want to put our x terms by each other. So we have x squared. We're not changing signs or anything. Minus 6x. And I want you to go ahead and write plus a blank. And then just put that in a parentheses so you can look at it as one thing. Since those are x's, we're going to just think of it as just the x's polynomial. And then we have a positive y squared, so write plus y squared. And we have a positive 4y, so plus 4y. And then I want you to do another plus a blank. And then I would put that in a parentheses too. It's just to kind of separate it in your mind that these are x's and these are y's. So you're doing the same thing but to two different things. Then you have this equal sign and a 3. So when we complete the square, we're going to be adding something to this side of this polynomial. So you have to add it to the other side. And when we add something to this side, we have to add that same number to this side. I'm just going to set it up so it's already there so you see it. Now we'll go practice completing the square. Okay, so what we need to find out is what perfect square number would go right here so that we could factor it to a binomial square. So remember, this is where we take that negative 6 right there, and we can just divide it by 2. It's the same as saying times 1/2. And that is the number negative 3. So complete the square means that's when we square that result, and it gives us the perfect square number of positive 9. You're always getting a positive number here. That's why I went ahead and put plus signs. That will always be positive every time. So we can put plus 9 here. That's my perfect square number that makes this, the x's polynomial, a perfect square trinomial. So if I add that here, I have to add it also over here. Remember, your equal sign, it has to be equivalent. So if you change the left side, you have to change the right hand side. The one in red, I'll do it in red. So 4 is the number we're looking at, and we divide it by 2. So you're always dividing by 2. Look at that pattern. That's the number 2. And then I square it. Right? Take that number and I square it. Same step. So that gives me the number 4. So this is the perfect square number that I'm going to add to this. That makes that a perfect square trinomial. So we'll add that over here. So this is what you're doing to complete the square. That's basically what you should have done on number 7, right? You would have just told me if this was the polynomial, you would have added 9. That's what I was wanting to know on that part of the quiz. So we need to go factor those to the binomial squareds, because you'll have a binomial squared plus a binomial squared. So let's think about that. If I were factoring this, think about factoring rules that you learned. If I took negative 3 times negative 3, that would give me a positive 9. You want to think what number times itself. When we talk about squares, we're talking about numbers that you're multiplying times itself. That would make a positive 9. If I add those together, because they're both negative, it would make a negative 6, right? So in our factoring, we just put x minus 3. Remember, again, that pattern, this number is the same as that in your factoring too, right? You guys see, remember that? You took this number and squared it to make it that number. Now we're pulling it back apart to factor it. Okay, here, this one, we would be taking 2 times 2 to make 4, and if they were both positive, wouldn't that make a 4 middle term? They add up. So when we factor this would be an x plus 2 squared. Which again, this 2 is the same as that 2. Alright, so over here we can do some math. 3 plus 9 is 12, plus 4 is 16. So we have to get it in this form so we can find the center and the radius. So that's why we had to know how to complete the square, because maybe the polynomial is not really, set up in the right form to do that. So my center is what?
3, -2.
Right? A +3, -2. Take your opposite signs for your center, and your radius is what?
4.
Right, it's 4. It's because we're taking the square root of 16, which is 4. This problem right here is like, I feel like I must have changed spacing or something and it got pulled up to this page, so there's not a lot of space, but we can make it work. But we're doing all the same things. The only thing that's different about this one is, do you see that we have a constant on the left? Remember when you learned about solving quadratic equations? Everything had a starting point. So you always have to look at that. Can we even start yet? Does anything have to be moved first? So we need to move this over here. And we would do that by adding, correct? Put +11, +11. Then that would help us set that up. I'm going to go ahead and in the same step rearrange it all. So I'm going to take my x squareds and my +6x. I like to gather my x terms together and put plus a blank. And then I have my plus y squared plus 8y plus a blank. And then we have our equal sign now, and 11 is over on the right hand side. And if you plus a blank for what's written in black, the x's. And if you plus a blank over there, you have to add something over here. You don't really have to set those blanks there, it just kind of helps you remember what's happening. So I'm going to do the complete the square stuff for this problem just above. So what number am I looking at in the x's to complete the square? 6. What do I do to 6?
Divide by 2.
Divide by 2. Good job. Look at us. We have it. And then we square that result and we get the number 9. So 9 is the perfect square number that you're going to add to both sides. Okay, how about the y's? How do we make a perfect square trinomial for the y's? What number are we looking at?
8.
8. And we do what to it?
Divide by 2.
Divide it by 2. So same steps. That's a 4. And then I square that number, same step, which gives me the number 16. So I'm adding 16 here to make that perfect square trinomial, so I have to also add it here to keep it equivalent. So this parentheses here would factor back to an x plus 3 squared. How did I do that so fast? It's a pattern, right? But also you could think right here, that was a +3. If you really need to, you can go do your factors. 3 times 3 is 9. Oh, that's positive. They both need plus signs. That's how I know it's an x plus 3 this time. Here we have y something squared. Am I adding something or subtracting something? Adding, and what number?
4.
4. Good job. 4 times 4 is 16. It's that same number that's in that second step of completing the square. And they're both positive. So an x plus 4. And then 11 plus 9 is 20, plus 16 is 36. So we have it in a good spot to say, what is my center?
-3.
-4.
Right? -3, -4. So you take your opposite signs. And then what's my radius?
6.
6. Any questions about circles? So circles isn't really that difficult, other than you do have to remember how to complete the square, because you are going to be given problems like 5 and 6. It's not going to be given to you in the right form, which was called standard form for a circle. So you kind of need to be aware of what the H and K represent, right? Because it's really important with your center. Okay, let's turn the page.